Are we good? So it is now 5:30, which is the time for the January 2022 Butte-Silver Planning Board. We don't have anything on the agenda tonight as far as community planning business, but per your bylaws, January is a month where you have to have a meeting, and for one reason is you need to elect some officers tonight. So for the record, our vice chair, our chairperson has retired and our vice chair is not here, so I will chair the meeting until we get to the election of officers portion and then turn it over to whoever you elect as a chair. First item on the agenda is roll call of members. Can you do roll call, please, Robin?
Mike McLeod. Here. Denise Anderson. Here. Matt Sticer.
Pretty good. I'm here.
Julie Jackson. Here. Bart Riley.
Here.
Josh O'Neill. Jeremy Sally.
Here.
Tim Schrups.
Here.
Bill Daly.
Here.
So the next item is approval of the minutes of the August 26, 2021 meeting. Anybody review the minutes and like to make a motion?
I would second it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, so the next one, item number 4, is election of officers. We need to elect a chair and a vice chair. So I'll open it up for board discussion.
Is it proper to ask if they would like to serve? Yes, just gonna say maybe let's have some more discussion. Does anybody have an interest in that? The chair doesn't have a voting seat, right, unless there's a tie? I think you do.
If there's a tie.
I think they, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I have the bylaws here.
Because I think Josh asked last time if he was supposed to vote or not.
Right.
He wasn't sure. And they said if there was a tie, he would be the tiebreaker.
Do you have interest in that? I would rather vote, but I. You'd rather be a voting member? I would, but if no one's. And Dylan, where I'm confused, I thought that was with the council and the chief executive is breaking.
Yeah, hold on.
Our board is I thought it would be voting. I think Josh threw us off last time because I think he said that at the meeting, and I'm sure did Janet vote? I can't remember.
I think she did. Each member present shall vote on every item under consideration by the planning board unless excused by a majority of the board members present, or unless that member has declared a conflict. I think you're a voting member. Chairperson votes. It just says each member shall vote on every item.
I thought they did, but I defer to you guys. Are there any other responsibilities
Just
other than attending?
just delegating the meeting, so you'll run the agenda and you'll stop people from being belligerent. Stuff like that.
Belligerent board members?
That too. Yeah, so the chair is technically the person that cancels the meetings if there's nothing on the agenda, can call for special meetings if they so feel, becomes your meeting if you're the chair.
Are the bylaws on the website, or can we?
No,
email
I'll get
those to
you,
us?
I'll get you a copy.
That'd be great, thank you.
No, it just says every member shall vote, unless you ask to be excused.
Well, maybe, Matt, if we got in a situation we found out later, we could go through the process, you could resign and somebody, you know.
Well, there's 9 members. So if the chair wasn't a voting member, then you have the possibility for a tie. You don't have the possibility for a tie.
Unless somebody doesn't show up to a meeting.
We assume that you're all dedicated citizens.
Is there anybody else that would, Jeremy or anybody else that would like to be like a vice chair or a chair or whatever?
Well, I definitely think we know who the vice chair will be if Matt wants to take on the chair roles. Mr. O'Neill, I'm sure would be happy to fill that role.
Josh?
Yeah, he's not here, so we can vote him in.
This is
It's either gonna be chair or vice chair, so obviously.
Well, is it appropriate if I make a motion there, Dylan?
Does anyone else want to be chair?
That's what I was asking. I didn't know if somebody wanted to. I know Bart, I can speak for Bart, and we don't want to be chair. Is that fair enough?
Yeah.
Denise?
Would you be up for it, Matt, or?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
I think you'd be good.
I think you'd be good too.
What, we make a motion that nominate Matt Steitzer for the chairman and Josh O'Neill as the vice chair?
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
All right.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, Matt, you want to do the next thing? So the only other business that we have is we have a couple things. We haven't been meeting very regularly. That's, sorry, but it's probably going to change. There's a couple things that are going to be on your plate coming up. One is we're looking at hiring a consultant to update the zoning ordinance. So just like the growth policy, we will, planning board will obviously be very involved in that as a steering committee, being that you are the zoning commission. That's probably going to take a while. Butte-Silver staff will put together an RFP, release it for bid, and then depending on the bids, you know, select a consultant and start moving forward and have them come present to this board quite often, and public hearings and all the fun stuff, just like we just did with the growth policy. Another thing that's coming up is our floodplain ordinance is out of date, and we are adopting new floodplain maps on June 1st. And to do that, our ordinance needs to come into compliance. So you will have a draft model regulation, floodplain regulation in front of you in the next month or so, and then for recommendation to the council commissioners to adopt that.
Could I ask a question on that?
Absolutely.
So when that changed, and I don't remember if anybody here remembers, was it 10 or 15 years ago, it seems like they changed, give or take? And they seem to be more restrictive, if you will. You know, more properties fell into the floodplain, it seemed like in general. Is there any general understanding if that's gonna be furthermore or less, or if that has anything to do with it, or?
The maps aren't gonna change. So what is in the floodplain is in the floodplain, except for the Silver Bow Creek corridor that is being adopted on June 1. That actually, there's less properties involved, and the adoption process has already happened through FEMA. The floodplain regulations themselves are what are out of date.
Oh, I get it. Okay, so if there's construction within or what?
Yeah, the process of permitting through floodplain.
Okay,
And
I'm sorry. I thought the
here's the
maps
thing.
themselves were changing.
Well, the one is in the Silver Bow Creek
Right.
corridor, and that was based on the streamside reclamation. The state changed the maps because they're done with the reclamation, and they changed the creek.
Okay.
The regulations are out of date, and just so everybody's aware, not to take your voice out, but floodplain is one of those things that we can't be more stringent, can't be less stringent than the state of Montana, who gets theirs from FEMA. So it's one of those things where they like local municipalities to adopt their own floodplain regulations, as long as they meet the requirements of the state floodplain regulations. So you have to regulate to what the state says you regulate, but they make you adopt your own regulations to do so. So our thought moving forward is that the NRC has model regulations that meet those criteria, that we would adopt those, very similar to how we did the subdivision regulations. Same with subdivision, you have to comply with state law for subdivision regulations. You don't get to vary from it as a local government. You just adopt it into your own code. So what will be in front of you is the model regulations. There are a few little nuances where you can adopt higher standards if you want to, and there's a couple areas where you could be more stringent than state law if we want to as a local government. One is we can not permit cemeteries in a floodplain. They decided to leave that up to the local government. But that's like one example. The other ones are very, very similar. The permitting process, everything has to meet FEMA regulations. So legally, there's not much that we can change, but it's good to go through so everybody's aware of where the floodplains are and what it takes to develop in them. Butte-Silver Bow is pretty lucky. Most of our floodplains are developed. They're in the middle of town, right? This means a lot more for communities that are looking to expand into areas with floodplain, but most of our floodplains are built out. There's already houses in them.
Can you speak in general to the ordinance that you previously talked about, like the ordinances are we gotta change it basically? What, are things we're just not in compliance, is it?
Yeah,
we need
so
to
the
make
state
major
adopted
changes?
new floodplain regulations, and they're all through the state legislature.
I'm sorry, I was going to the item before, talking about the zoning ordinances.
Oh, the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, I'm sorry. In general, what are we gonna be doing? Clean up what we already have?
No, I think
major
we're gonna be
changes?
repealing and replacing, and it's going to be based off of the framework set up in the comprehensive plan. So my guess is that the way that the community's gonna want to go is to more of a form-based type of zoning, because that's kind of the groundwork that we laid in the comprehensive plan with place types. Less restrictive on use and more geared towards keeping character of neighborhoods. For instance, uptown is, a lot of uptown is zoned R2, which is two-family residential, and there are triplexes and fourplexes and fiveplexes and stuff absolutely everywhere. The goal is to keep that character and allow those types of uses, but more geared towards reduced setbacks or bricks on facades to keep everything looking in the historic district the same as every other building in the historic district. That's kind of the groundwork that the comprehensive plan laid out. That's kind of what the Uptown Master Plan is probably going to also recommend, but just kind of a new way to look at zoning. Our zoning ordinance was created in 1978, and it's very tiered type and definitely out of date. I think 83 recommendations from the comprehensive plan were to update the zoning ordinance to more current times. So that's was the goal and the thought process behind that. We were able to get some money in the this fiscal year's budget to hire a consultant, and it's a pretty big undertaking. Billings just did theirs. It took them like 3 years.
Dylan, design standards, that's where you would come into a zoning ordinance, is that right?
That is the most common tool for design standards, is a zoning ordinance.
What's our budget for hiring a consultant?
You're no longer a consultant, right, Jeremy? I think we have $175,000.
Yeah, because I echo what you're saying, it'll be a pretty big undertaking.
Yeah. A lot of the permitted uses listed in our zoning ordinance, especially in our commercial zones, aren't even things anymore. Those types of businesses don't exist. So it's difficult relating to, from a use perspective when you're trying to permit things. A big push in the state right now is that, you know, you have subdivision regulations, and then you look at things again, the same things from a zoning regulation perspective, and there's a lot of similarities between what you're reviewing, lot sizes, for example, stuff like that, and that it makes it hard for, it lengthens review times. And a lot of things that you look at in your zoning ordinance are related to general health and safety, and building codes, when they get a building permit, are also there to regulate for general health and safety of the public, and it's can be redundant in some ways as far as permitting goes. But the zoning ordinance, the planning board is the zoning commission, it's the steering committee, it's whatever route that you guys want to go for guiding development in the future.
What's the timeline on that for like RFP, somebody getting started, the whole process?
Well, I would say in the next couple months, I would hope to have a consultant on board and doing presentations and trying to figure out where we're going to go. The comprehensive plan is what sets the guidelines for that. All zoning regulations have to be in compliance with the comprehensive plan. So the work that you all have done the last 2 years in adopting that plan, this is just the next extension of that.
Hey, Dylan, Bill and Tim may already know this, but maybe just give them just a real brief, this is why we did the comprehensive plan. It wasn't just why we had to do it and stuff.
As far as the comprehensive plan goes, state statute requires that you have, they call it a growth policy, we call it a comprehensive plan. You have to update it every 10 years, and it's just basically a community guiding document that says where you want future development, how you want it to happen, and it's a reference document made for making decisions at a municipal level as far as zoning, or it's meant to guide policy. It's a reference document that guides policy. We had one that was adopted in 2008. We started an update in 2018 and adopted it finally at the end of 2020. So it's been adopted since November of 2020, and it sets the framework for policy in the future, not just zoning. That is one, you know, the Uptown Master Plan will fall in line. That's another plan, but the Parks and Rec plan that they're doing now will fall in suit with that. And it's a document that's used for grant funding. You identify areas that need more municipal facilities, and if you're applying for things, we used it a lot in applying for the ARPA funding that was just happening. It's the community's voice of this is how we want Butte to look in the next 10 years. And the biggest thing that came out of that process of adopting the comprehensive plan was the need for an updated zoning ordinance, that our zoning ordinance was out of date. So that was it comes with an implementation plan of how you're gonna get there. You know, you just plan the community that you want, and then there's this implementation plan of how you get there. Probably the biggest one to cross everything off on those goals and objectives was update the zoning ordinance. Sorry if that was long-winded, but
That's good.
I like comprehensive planning stuff. Don't judge.
Well, I mean, the gist of it too, if I'm correct, is we wouldn't, like, to be able to get grants and things, we had to have that in place, or we couldn't even apply for them.
Yeah, if you don't have a comprehensive plan, you don't get to really do anything. Every subdivision has to go through an environmental study. Every time you apply for a municipal facilities exemption, you have to show that these extension of services are in the plan for the community. I mean, you need one.
Yeah.
And it was for those of you that were here during that time, you know, we did a lot of public outreach, and you kind of get a feel for what the community in general wants and where they're moving forward. And the goal is to then update policy to reach those goals. You know, we're in a different place than we were in 2008. We have different struggles and different obstacles and different opportunities, and how do you capitalize on the opportunities, and how do you solve the issues? You know, at 2008, we were just doing this urban sprawl where, you know, Beef Trail and Buffalo Estates and everybody was moving out of town and we were spreading out. And, you know, then you realize that septic systems cost $50,000 if you live out there, and it's better to be hooked to municipal services. And, you know, now there's this big push for infill and how do you get people back to Butte, because we have all this infrastructure here that, you know, we need to utilize. So communities change over time, and that comprehensive plan is to keep everybody on track to reach a common goal. So the one that we adopted in 2020 was probably the first one in the state that went to more of a place type than a use type future land use map. We used to say, this is industrial, this is where industrial things need to go, this is commercial, this is where commercial things to go. And from a future perspective, this is commercial, but in the future we think it should be industrial, you know, and that's not really kind of what we adopted. It's more of how you want your neighborhoods to look like, not just residential, but commercial and industrial, and how you want things to flow and what streets are gonna look like, and you know, looking at things like building setbacks and those types of requirements, or even what buildings look like uptown, because it's important to protect that historical resource. It's more inclusive, our comprehensive plan is, than probably ever before. And it sets a good framework for changing policy to capitalize on those types of opportunities and solve some issues that we have from a development permitting standpoint. So yeah, we hope to get that underway. You guys will be very much kept in the loop and involved, and here we go. Two ordinances. The planning department administers 3 of them. We're gonna write 2 new ones this year.
And there'll be a lot of public outreach for the zoning ordinance.
Absolutely. Probably more so than the comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan, I think everybody kind of looked at it and said, you know, this is a guiding document, it's not regulatory. When you start telling people we're going to implement regulations on your property, you will get more interest. The zoning ordinance that we have now is very boilerplate. It's really simple. It's probably the least comprehensive that I've seen in Montana. It has listed uses, lists some setbacks, and that's about it. It is very open and liberal as far as what it permits. The type, if we follow consistent with the comprehensive plan, is going to be, what do we really care about as far as looking at development, and how do we regulate that? And are we regulating things in our existing zoning ordinance that really don't matter to start with? Use to some extent, you know, might be that thing. If building codes says that you can operate this type of use in this building safely, if it's not negatively impacting the neighbor, why not? And if you can't tell from the outside, why not? So it's form-based zoning, which is kind of what these place types gear towards, is more how do things look and feel, not what is going on inside of them. I mean, you drive down any place on the flat Ottawa Street or something like that, or Nettie, and it's just a bunch of brick ranchers. You know, do you regulate so it stays a bunch of brick ranchers that are 20 feet back from the curb, and everybody's got an attached garage and a driveway? Or does that matter to the community? And does it matter if they're single family or if there's 2 family and you can't tell from the outside? Those are the types of questions that will probably be asked during this update. What really matters? What do we need to regulate to now? And I think our comprehensive plan, in my opinion, is probably the best in the state. You got a really good guiding document to move forward.
So I don't, just a quick update for this board. I don't know if you guys know, but I was asked to sit in on the Butte Transportation Coordinating Committee, the BTCC, as a member of the planning board. So I represent the planning board on that committee. We had a meeting here early January. They have quarterly meetings. And some of the folks that are on there is like our chief executive, Public Works, MDT is a big part of that, and there's a voting contingent on there. And so the last project that we did, or that was nominated through that board, was Excel and Park Street, that I think everybody's probably pretty aware of that project. They're looking at, so I'll do a terrible job and I'll butcher this, but basically the state allots STPP funding to the city, and then this board is designed to decide where that money goes or what project that money goes towards. There's not, you can even build that money up. Like if you don't use it each year, you know, you can start kind of building that money up, and you can borrow against future years, and there's a lot of discussion there that I'll leave to those folks. But anyway, the discussions are starting, and this next meeting in March, April, the hope is that we're going to come to a consensus on a project. I could try to get I could bring that to this board just so everybody could see it, but it's fairly complex because, you know, it's not just we're gonna grab a project and go with that. Oh, that, you know, I think that project really needs to be done. There's a lot of coordination, and MDT and the city meet bi-weekly? Is it monthly? And so they get together and they talk about their goals and maintenance projects and new projects and all this other stuff. And so it kind of happens at that level, if you will, and then there's more of a presentation at our level to take a look at it and make sure everybody's in concurrence so that not one side is directing that. And anyway, just wanted to let this board know that that's what's going on. And if you guys wanted, I could bring those projects in front of this board so you guys could see what they were, but happy to do that. I just wanted to preface that with that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that, you know, you kind of let the city and the state work through, and then, you know, there's a presentation and discussion about funding and project priorities.
To kind of add to that, the project, and to clarify, that is one reason that this coordination committee was put together. The goal is going to be that committee decides all, if not most, if not all, transportation type decisions in Butte. So Jeremy will be your voice on that board, and we can have those discussions open here for sure. The allocation that we get from the state is like $600,000 a year.
Yeah.
And it's been building since we awarded Park and Excel. I think we have 1.8 million or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yep.
The projects that you have to pick for that, we actually have an adopted transportation plan. It's adopted in 2016 that identifies there's a lot of traffic studies and where problems and stuff are, and then identifies projects to alleviate those problems, and those funds have to be allocated to those projects in that plan. But it's a good committee, and it's good that the planning board has representation on that.
So if we
Because
have
it's very
a-
well
If
connected.
we have a meeting maybe next month, I can grab some of that material and distribute back to the planning office, and at least
And we can
everybody
get-
see a list of that, and we can kind of talk through it. I don't know all the details on every single project, because they're line items. They're all in the transportation plan, like Dylan said.
Well, I can send a link to the transportation plan for everybody.
Sure.
If you're having trouble falling asleep, it is literally probably 700 pages. But a lot of those is just traffic studies and data tables.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, my opinion is you go to that committee is, just like Dylan said, it's a coordination to try to get both the city and state on the same page in terms of how that funding is going to be spent. Just like Dylan said, they all have to be elected projects off of the transportation plan, and even in our meeting, this last meeting, there was a lot of discussion about finishing off the project up there north of Excel and like continuing that project and working across a nice connector, but then you start talking about the funding and you only have X dollars here, and I don't know that that's gonna cover this project, and so like I said, there's a lot of coordination that has to take place at that meeting, but probably wouldn't be a bad idea that at least we show this board those projects, and if anybody had any input or, you know, thoughts on maybe what we ought to be trying to push, I'd be happy to take that to the committee.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very integrated with the stuff that you folks do, you know.
And it's an open meeting.
as you're
So if
approving-
anybody wanted to come to that, we can
Yeah.
forward that along too. It's
You know, as you're looking at approving subdivisions and changing policies and regulations and stuff like that, like transportation is a big aspect of that, so.
a driver, yeah,
Which is why Jeremy's there.
because I got
Just
asked to be.
remember.
Forced to be.
Any other questions? Mike, you don't look very excited for that zoning ordinance update.
I'm very excited for you to adjourn the meeting, but I can't say that out loud because it'd be rude to. No, I don't have any.
If there's nothing else, we can adjourn.
So moved.
Yeah,
All right.